Tonight we're in Salford, and welcome to Question Time. And welcome to our audience here tonight who are from different generations, one half under 30 and one half over 60. And welcome to our panel, the Conservative Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, Labour's Shadow Justice Secretary, Sadiq Khan, and the Liberal Democrat Olly Grender, an advisor to Nick Clegg until last year and now in the House of Lords. And you may have noticed 3 panellists we are, and 3 we remain tonight, because sad to say, our 2 other panellists who we'd asked to come, the Daily Telegraph blogger Tim Stanley and the broadcaster and writer Joan, Bakewell, were held up on the train because of a huge fire by the side of the track. They came halfway to Manchester and then went back to London or to Rugby or somewhere they've lost forever, I suspect. But anyway, when they do turn up, we'll have them on Question Time. They won't be here tonight. Time's up for them. So let's go to our first question. And remember, this time we get a lot of questions which are about the divide between the generations. And the idea behind this programme is just to explore some of those questions and other things in terms of these 2 generations, the under 30s and the under 60s. The first one is from Anthony Robinson, please.
Would the money spent on universal benefits for wealthy pensioners be better used to help young people?
And these are all that long list: free television licences, winter fuel, free bus passes, prescriptions, eye tests, even being exempted from the under-occupancy charge or the bedroom tax. Olly Grender, what do you think?
I think, Anthony, yes. I think on the whole they should. Where I think it gets difficult is we work on an assumption that you all look very young and sprightly to me on this side of the audience, and we work on an assumption that you are all baby boomers and therefore, you know, kind of reaping the rewards of a post-war era.
What, this lot here?
Yeah, yeah.
And they look very healthy?
They do look very healthy to me, yeah.
Right, okay.
They do look.
So do they need
healthy.
all these things they're getting?
And so, you know, kind of, I think what we need to stop doing is stop thinking of you as a homogenous group. There was a recent report in the place which I've just become a member of, the House of Lords, which says that age is no longer an indicator of need. For instance, you might be quite a wealthy pensioner or have quite a few assets in terms of property, but be quite lonely. Or you might have property but be pretty poor in terms of fuel poverty.
So are you saying you can't work out who to give these benefits to?
Well,
it's too difficult?
My preference would be that wealthier pensioners do give up bus passes. I mean, you know, definitely I would like to see that happen. But what I'm saying is that I think it's much harder than people assume to say you are all in this huge lump of quite wealthy. I don't think that you are. All right.
Jeremy Hunt, do you think you can define who are wealthy among pensioners and then say, look, you don't need the money, we're going to give it to that lot over there?
Well, you can do it, but the reason that we're not doing it is very straightforward. David Cameron made a promise before the last election that he would protect pensioner benefits, and he is someone who believes he must keep his word. And I think...
Was it a wise promise?
Well, the reason he made the promise was
Does
because...
it last till the next election?
It absolutely lasts till the next election. And
the reason after the next election?
Well,
if you win it.
He believes that it was right to protect pensioner benefits for a very simple reason, that we started the Parliament with a huge deficit to tackle and some very, very big decisions to take as to the fairest way to tackle that deficit. And we decided that pensioners were different because they have passed the point in their life where they're able to earn more money to make up for any shortfalls. And so we thought it was right to make that decision. I think the worry that pensioners have is that if you start chipping away at some of the entitlements, then others may follow. And so we have been true to our word. We've kept our promise on protecting the state pension and on pensioner benefits. And I think in a very difficult period, I think that shows our commitment to the people who would find it most difficult otherwise to make up for their earnings.
OK. You, sir, in the second row.
I have to admit, I'm quite confused about why we constantly seem to be coming back to this question of whether these benefits should be taken away from wealthier pensioners, because, I mean, wouldn't this have been done years ago if it was so easy to do? I mean, from what I understand, it's because it would be difficult to administer to mean test and giving it to pensioners. And I think we should maybe perhaps stop dividing the groups against each other, because, I mean, eventually us young people are going to be pensioners too, and if we pay into the system, we should expect something back.
OK, and you, sir, up there?
Didn't David Cameron also promise not to top-down reorganise the NHS?
All right, I think that's what's called a rhetorical question. The man over there, the far left there. You, sir.
Perhaps the MPs should lead by example. There's 320 MPs who's been claiming gas and electric allowance on their expenses. Perhaps they could donate that to the pensioners.
And you, sir, there. You, sir, in the second row from the back. Yes.
The definition of a wealthy pensioner now seems to be taken as anybody who pays tax at the standard rate, which is they have an income of slightly over £10,500. Well, that's a ludicrous
Where do you get that definition from? I mean, it could be much richer pensioners.
Because the government don't like to means tests, that is where the line is likely to be drawn.
Sadiq Khan, what do you make of the argument?
Well, I don't want to pit the old against the young, but I think Anthony's question goes to a root issue here, which is the British promise basically is that those who are the next generation will do better than the current generation. And the way the social contract works is it's a pyramid where those at the bottom who are working pay taxes which go towards your pension. You get out what you put in. But there's a big problem, which is that this generation will, for the first time in generations, be less well off than that generation. I'm an MP in London. The average age of the first-time buyer of a property in London is 38 years. And we're going to have a discussion about some universal benefits staying universal, the pension. I think the bus pass is very important, Ollie. Many older people need the bus pass to see their friends, to see their family. It addresses loneliness. It's a way of getting out of their house.
But people like Richard Branson and Alan Sugar don't need, but are entitled
Ollie,
to it,
if they don't
which
use
is
their
ridiculous.
pension, they don't take anything out. Don't you know how it works? The way it works is you use your bus pass. Richard Branson doesn't use his bus pass. We're not paying for his bus pass. Many of these pensioners have got pride and dignity. If you means test them for their bus pass, they're not going to apply for it. They'll be stuck at home. It'll cost the NHS more money, and it'll be a huge cost to all of us. What we do need to do, though, is rather than pitting you against them, make sure these guys have a proper future, invest in them, proper apprenticeships, get them to work, get them paying tax, pay national insurance, and rebuild that social contract.
The problem we have with the bus passes is, if the people didn't use them, the buses would be empty. They've still got to run, they've got schedules to keep. They run whether there's people on the bus or not. Why take it away from the people who could use it and benefit from it and fill the buses?
You're nodding in agreement, Jeremy Hunt, with that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with Sadiq on this point. I mean, the point is we pay for the bus passes for the people who need them. We don't end up paying for them for the richer pensioners anyway. And I actually also agree with his other point, that I think, without wanting to dispute the premise of this programme, David, I actually don't think that there is any point in trying to pit one age group against another, because all young people have parents and grandparents. They want to see through their old age with dignity and respect. And all grandparents want opportunities for their grandchildren. And I think, you know, actually what everyone wants is to make sure that we have a fair society where we're taking the right decisions for the long term, where everyone gets those opportunities. I think we can do that, but it does mean being prepared to take difficult decisions when you're in a difficult period, when you've got big challenges ahead, as we all have, and those challenges do change.
David, if I could...
But, yes.
But I think... But I think one of the problems is that you know, kind of, if you got on the housing ladder at the age of these people here, and if you were lucky enough to do the age of these people here,
I don't know which way
on this side, sorry,
yeah, on the older
right. generation, and you've built up a great deal of equity, and it's so much harder now to get into housing, and yet that is the basis in the UK, unfortunately, of a lot of people's wealth. It's very, very hard. So what we would need to do then is have quite a good and lengthy discussion about how that older people give up some of the equity or release that to
All right, well, we may come to housing later on. The man up there on the right. You,
oh,
sir.
well, I was waiting for it, Jeremy, and thank you for bringing it up. For once, David, I actually agree with the whole panel. It's not their fault. It is not our fault. It's your fault. We weren't the ones who sold off the council houses. We weren't the ones who sold off the gold at its lowest rate. We weren't the ones who promised 9,000, you're nodding, we were the ones who promised no tuition fees, then as soon as they got anywhere near government, sold out everybody who voted for them, and then put
more students,
people
more
in poverty,
poorer students
put people in poverty
before.
to not allow it. You're the ones who did it. It's your fault, isn't it? You were the ones who allowed a banking crisis. You were the ones who allowed banks to unregulate it.
You make your point. Yes.
It's your fault.
All right, thank you, Sadiq.
I mean, the really big questions we need to grapple with is, we should be very proud of this, we're living much older than we were historically. And so there are big questions about social care. We will be looking after our parents because they'll live longer, and thank goodness. There are big questions about social care. Also, people who are older will have to work longer as well. There are big questions about when pension entitlements kick in. But it's an issue for all of us because we will be old one day as well. That's why the idea of having generations clashing is not the way to do it. But I say this, Ollie, tinkering around with bus passes, which is a huge lifeline for many pensioners, ain't the source of addressing these problems. These are big questions.
But there are
big
a lot
answers.
of pensioners. There are a lot of pensioners who actually want to give up some of the benefits that they have and have made that clear.
Well, can't
for
they give them up?
generation.
You don't have to take a bus pass. You don't have to take your winter fuel allowance. You could give it away. You don't have to do any of these things, do you?
Well, but...
When you say there are people who want to give up the...
Yeah, there are people who are saying we don't want to receive these kind of things and we'd like to give them up.
Who said who are they? Yeah,
well,
who are they? Maybe you're one of them.
No.
No?
I agree with the gentleman who spoke at the back about who defines a wealthy pensioner. Okay. You know, who does it? The 10,000 business. I mean, I pay income tax, small amount, but, you know, am I going to be one of these wealthy pensioners?
Could you define a wealthy pensioner if the government decided to?
Well, of course, the government can do these things.
If we pay 40% tax,
as I say,
how much would it save?
Actually, the sums are much, much smaller. I've looked at some of these sums, and I think they are much, much smaller than you might think, because actually, usually, most people's definition of wealthy is you know, super wealthy, and actually, it doesn't have a huge impact because those people often aren't claiming benefits in the first place. So, I just think that the problem is that we have to recognise that we have a very, very expensive benefits bill, and we have to take some difficult decisions as the fairest way to deal with it,
and is it
given the
fair
challenges
to do
that we
what
face.
David Cameron is proposing for the next manifesto, you haven't talked about that, of abolishing all benefits for the under-25s?
Well,
so you are...
No.
Is that fair?
Well, what he
saving,
said...
Saving how much?
What he said is that everyone under the age of 25 should be earning or learning. And I think that is absolutely right. I think it's completely wrong that someone can leave school, sign on, find a house or a flat to rent, get housing benefit, and then start a life on the dole. And I think it's immoral, actually, and we need to have a society that doesn't allow that to happen. And if you look at Holland, they actually don't allow anyone to claim benefits under the age of 27. And they have half the youth unemployment that we have. And what they do is they find a combination of studying and working. And actually, I think that is a much, much better start for people.
Right. The woman in the second row there, you in favour of that policy?
No. I think it's kind of shocking that it's coming at a time to tell young people to earn or learn when the minimum wage is so far below the living wage. Informal contracts, zero-hour contracts, and a failure to provide people with formal amounts of work skyrocketing, and then fees for education have also gone through the roof. So earning and learning is becoming increasingly difficult, and then you're telling people they have no safety net if they fail.
And abolishing, you're against abolishing the benefit, yes. Sadiq, we'll move on, because we've got a lot of questions, but are you in favour or against this proposal of the under-25s not getting benefits?
I'm against it, and I'm against making a sweeping generalisation about young people. I'm not sure where Jeremy lives, but look, there are young people, many young people don't get to go to Oxford and get a good job when they leave Oxford. More than half won't go to university. Why doesn't the government focus on those 50% who don't go to university by giving them the vocational skills they need to get a proper job? Why not put pressure on big business to require them, if they want a government contract, to provide apprenticeships for young people? The way to reduce the benefit bill, Jeremy, is not necessarily to cut benefits, but get these guys into work.
I'm sorry,
get them
Sadiq,
apprenticeships,
I'm sorry,
give them the skills they need to get the job. There are more than one.
Double the
there are
number
almost
of
1 million
apprenticeships than under Labour.
Jeremy, I didn't
double
interrupt you.
the number
Jeremy,
of apprenticeships.
I didn't
No,
interrupt
but
you.
you're just telling stuff that isn't right.
Can I finish my point?
You finish it, and then I'll respond. Go on, then.
There are almost 1 million young people unemployed. In the last quarter, the number of young people unemployed for more than a year went up by 7,000. There are record numbers not in employment, education and training. These guys are desperate for education, desperate for employment.
Well, they're in the right place. They're in the right place because in Salford, apprenticeships went up 90% since Labour left the government.
All right. Where? In Salford?
In Salford.
When you cut education maintenance allowance, when you treble tuition fees, don't be surprised if these guys don't have the carrots to go to university or college.
You've got to get the figures right, Sadiq. You've got to get the figures right, see. This is the big difference. Labour is very good at talking the talk, but actually youth unemployment went up by 50% under Labour. Under this government, this coalition government, we have 1.5 million apprenticeships has started. That is double the starts that we had under Labour. And we have to recognise, actually, that we are doing a lot of things. The number of NEETs, the people who are not in education, employment and training, that's gone down by 50,000 since when Labour is in power. So we're actually doing the things that are helping young people, and I think that's what counts in the end.
We'll go on, because we've got a lot of questions. I'd like to get through several more in this programme. As always, you know, you can join in the debate from home by text or Twitter, depending on your generation, I suppose. Our hashtag is BBC... Yeah, hold on, sir, hold on. Say it in a moment. Our hashtag is BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text comments to 83981, and the red button will let you see what others are saying. Let's take another question. Catherine Johnson, please.
If clever banks and bankers in London cheat us, and ethical banks mess up, who can a Manchester girl trust?
If clever banks and bankers in London cheat us and ethical banks mess up, who can a Manchester girl trust? Sadiq Khan.
Well, it's shocking, the revelations at the Cooperative Bank, the appointment of the chairman and what's happened over the last 3 years in particular. Had things been differently, they could have taken over 700 Lloyd's branches as well. I'm pleased and I welcome the various inquiries that are taking place. We need to learn the lessons.
All of them, including the Prime Minister's one?
Absolutely. I'll look at all the inquiries. The Chancellor's in out, the inquiry the Treasury Select Committee will be doing, the inquiry being done by the Financial Conduct Authority, the inquiry the Cooperative Group is doing. Look, the cooperative movement is something we should all be proud of. It's about mutuals, not-for-profits, getting involved in the provision of funeral services, legal services, grocery stores, financial advice as well. Many people bank with the co-op because it's an ethical product. And when you bear in mind who's now bailing them out, people who are banking with a cooperative are concerned. The cooperative has a political party as well. They're a sister to the Labour Party. We're very proud of our association with them.
Is it a safe bank to bank with, in your view?
Well, it's not for me to say whether it's safe or unsafe. There's no evidence that it's not safe. Otherwise, the regulators, and we've changed the way banks are regulated now, would be stepping in. The fact they've not stepped in gives me a source of confidence. I'm pleased that we're looking into the affairs of the Cooperative Bank. What I would say is this, though. To make a sweeping assertion against the cooperative movement based upon the actions of one ex-chairman and what happened last year, I think is very, very unfair. In this part of the country, in particular, over the last 100 years, you've seen the cooperative movement, mutuals, doing a huge source of good for this part of the country.
OK, well, what can a Manchester... what can a Manchester girl do?
Well, there are various guarantees. So if you've got savings with the Cooperative Bank, your savings up to about £80,000 are safe. One of the concerns I have is actually what the focus should be from the Prime Minister is not cheap party political points against Ed Miliband or the Labour Party. It should be making sure borrowers, savers and investors are reassured that their monies are safe with the Cooperative Bank rather than cheap party political points.
All right, cheap party political points, Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I actually agree with Sadiq that mutuals...
You can't keep agreeing with
well, I'm sure... Well, we had a little bit of a disagreement, didn't we, just now over statistics. But mutuals are a brilliant concept. And I think in a period where people are mistrusting banks, actually the sort of trust you get with someone like John Lewis it gives you confidence in an organisation, and I think we should be encouraging different ownership models. And in fact, we are doing a study at the moment to see whether there's anything that we can learn in the NHS about the mutuals movement. But I think in this case, we should be thinking about the nearly 8 million individual bondholders in the Co-op Bank, because they're people, most of these people are not wealthy people. These are their life savings that they've invested in something that they trusted. They got a dividend last year, they haven't had a dividend this year, and they are wondering how on earth the Reverend Flowers managed to become the chairman of this bank. And I think the shocking thing is how someone with the crystal meths creates a lot of newspaper headlines, but the really awful thing is how someone with so little knowledge of banking actually got to run a really important institution. And I just hope that... I just hope, because, you know, we're clearing up a lot of mess after the banking crisis, but I hope it does look like he got that job because of his connections, and some of them, you know, they look very good political connections, and I just hope the Labour Party will be totally transparent, because I think their responsibility is to those 8 million bondholders to make sure we get to the truth, make sure that they have a secure future for their savings, and make sure this can never, ever happen again.
Is it a cheap political point to attach the blame to Labour? Well,
I think, in fairness, there were very, very big connections between the Labour Party and the Co-op Bank. It's a big donor, and I think it's also important to say that all the bondholders haven't got their dividends. Labour's still got its loan. So I think the least Labour can do is actually be honest and transparent about what happened.
The woman there in the third row from the back, or second row, would it be? Yes, you then.
Would this have ever come to light if Mr Flowers' seedy past hadn't been exposed by a national newspaper?
Olly, your view.
It's possible that the answer to that is no. I think it is possible that the answer to that is no. And we still rely on our newspapers as thriving and vibrant campaigning and exposing organisations. For instance, we're seeing the trial, the Murdoch trial at the moment, or rather, the trial that's looking at the telephone hacking. And that would not have been exposed if it hadn't been for some of the newspapers. I think that as a long-term customer of the Co-op myself, I am pretty disappointed in all of this. And what I really ask is, how on earth, still, after the banking crisis that we had in 2007, what on earth, why is there still a kind of regulatory system that isn't picking up these kind of things?
Okay.
The one thing I would say, though, is that if we're going to have 4 inquiries about what on earth happened in the past, I'm not overly interested in that right now. Tomorrow and next week, what I'm really interested in is saving what I think is a great bank. And it's the kind of bank we need rather than payday lenders.
Thank you. You on the gangway there, yes.
Mr Hunt seems to like winning some political points with regards to laying some of the blame of the cooperative affair at the Labour Party. Perhaps then we should start looking more into the financial organisations that have made significant payments to the Conservative Party and their dodgy appointments.
We have. Do you agree with him?
I mean, Jeremy can't help himself. He began his answer by saying he agrees with me, but he had to make his cheap point. The bank has not given any loans that are not secured long-term commercial agreements. They've given no donations to the Labour Party. Andrew Tyree made recommendations to the Banking Commission, which, if he'd implemented now, would have uncovered some of this. And actually, last year, the Chancellor George Osborne and the Treasury ministers spent a great deal of time lobbying Brussels to change the rules and trying to persuade the cooperative bank to take over the Lloyds branches. That's the last 3 years, Jeremy, under your watch. So can we stop making the cheap points about our connection with the cooperative bank?
The Chancellor,
if you're talking about the movement, that's a different point. We're very proud of our link with the cooperative movement, and we should all be proud of the stuff they've achieved over the last 150 years. Don't brag.
All right, you made your point. All right, go on, Jeremy, quickly.
No, I was just saying... The Chancellor actually lobbied on behalf of the Co-op Bank, which is a donor to the Labour Party. That's not being political. What we're saying is...
So let's clear this thing up. You say it's not it doesn't loan... You say it doesn't lend money.
There is a donor.
Well,
the bank is not a donor to the Labour Party.
It lends. Well, he did a donor to Ed Ball's office, the cooperative group.
No, the cooperative group is... The bank is very different. Look...
Hang on, all I've said, and I think this is very important, is I didn't actually say anything political. What I actually said was that we need transparency from Labour to get to the bottom of this, because nearly 8 million bondholders others are worrying about what's going to happen to their savings, and we need to make sure that we find out the truth. And that's all we're saying, and I don't think you could disagree with that.
All right, I want to go on to another question, which is one that affects the generations we have here, because, well, of course, everything that we've talked about does, banking included. But let's move on to a question from Paul George, please.
What can the government do about the housing market when average wages have decreased while house prices continue to rise?
And this is something that does affect a younger generation who can't get onto the housing ladder, effectively. Average wages decreasing, house prices going up. Jeremy Hunt.
Well, I do think if you look at how the world has changed when I left university to now, one of the biggest challenges is that it is so much harder to buy a house. And I think that there are other things that have got better for young people. The technology revolution has made huge strides, but this is a really difficult thing because everyone wants to own a house, and rightly so. And there are some big challenges if we're going to get this right. What can we do? Well, first of all, we need to get new housing starts going again. They have now finally got back to their 2008 levels, but it has been a real struggle through the recession. We also need to look at the planning laws. And my party, the government, made some very controversial changes to the planning laws to try and make sure that we do start building houses. Because I think the biggest betrayal of young people would be actually if we said, well, we've got our houses now and we're not going to do what it takes to help young people get a foot on the housing ladder. But the third thing we can do is access to finance. And that's why the Help to Buy scheme, I think, has been really significant. It's now helping 75 people every day, 75 families get their home. It is true that it's still a real struggle, and I don't want to underestimate that, but I think we have to do everything we can because it's something that hasn't changed between the generations, that basic desire to build a house, to own a house, and I think every government has a responsibility to do what it can to help people take that step.
The man at the very back there.
I think a big part of the actual problem here is the Labour government of the 90s, who set a specific target of sending nearly 50% of young people into higher education. The reality is now is that these young people, these people in this room, cannot afford to buy a house because they're coming out of university, there's not the graduate jobs there that they need, and they're having to take jobs on a much lower level, on a much less pay, in order to be able to survive. So they are not able to save up the money to buy a house. And that's something, Sadiq, your government's got, your previous government has to answer for.
Sadiq?
Let me address that. Look. So when the older members of the audience went to university, those that did, roughly speaking, 7% of that age group went to university. I'm very proud that we wanted to have almost 50% go into university. All four of us have benefited from
that target, though, did you?
All four of us have benefited from a university education.
I didn't.
The crisis in the housing market.
Olly didn't.
I didn't.
Besides Olly.
You too.
The crisis,
chairman.
The crisis is not caused by too many people going to university. The crisis is caused by not enough houses being built. Jeremy's criticised my figures. I'll give him another one. Last year, there were as many housing completes as in the 1920s. We're building fewer houses than any time in the last 70, 80 years. We need to build more houses. All right. It's as short as that.
All right, let's hear from the gentleman there on the older side. You, sir. Yes.
There's a paradox, isn't there, that there's a shortage of land, and yet there's property developers sort of holding on to land for years and years, waiting to maximise the prices. Yeah. And there should be legislation that makes them sort of start building houses within 12 months of buying the land.
Do you own a house yourself?
Yes.
And presumably it's gone up in value?
Yes.
You have children, grandchildren who are trying to get on the housing ladder? Any hope for them?
Well, my children have got on the housing ladder.
They have. How old are they?
40... Oh, good question. 40... 40
I know the feeling.
Yeah, 44, 42, 30...
So they're not here on this side of the audience?
Oh, no, no.
The woman there in the third row, and then I go to the man behind you. Yes.
I just find it a bit confusing that we're talking about the need to build more houses when there's currently loads of three-bedroom houses empty because of people affected by the bedroom tax. There's nobody that can move into them because they can't afford them.
All right. And the man behind. You, sir, behind.
My point is that at the moment there's the Help to Buy scheme, as in it's a bit scary because as in you're giving more people, well, people can't afford a house, more income. At the end of the day, the economy is not stable and jobs are not certain. So it doesn't make sense. Why would you give more people access to more money when the economy is not stable to a point where at least the income is actually stable enough to pay the mortgage.
Olly Grender.
Well, first of all, on the Help to Buy scheme, there are much more kind of checks and balances than there used to be. There used to be hundreds and hundreds of schemes that would lend money at 93% of the value of the house. And now it's just something like 43 products, as I understand it. If I can just come back to you on the issue of the single-room subsidy, because I know that what happened in Manchester is that a whole load of, kind of single-bedroom homes were bulldozed that could have been used, and also a lot of people in Manchester have been, as I understand it, evicted as tenants, at the same time that there is money available to Manchester to pay to tenants to keep them in those tenancies, unlike Stockport, which is Lib Dem controlled, where no tenants have been evicted under this kind of system. So first of all, on that, there is central government funding of 180 million that can help people through this. But if I can just say about the housing thing, which is that I was really interested to see that Ed Balls today was admitting that Labour kind of screwed up on this. When I was working at Shelter and trying to lobby the government, the Labour government then, to build more houses, it was just, we just got nowhere. And it's good to hear now that Ed Balls finally admits that housing was a big failure by the Labour government, because I think it was. We are now building and have finally managed to start building more affordable homes. And finally, for the first time, we're getting more social housing after it was sold off by successive Labour and Tory governments.
Sadiq Khan, briefly.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure where you live, Ollie, but that's not my experience. Look, there's
what about what Ed Balls said? Is that your experience? Did he say that?
We didn't.
Yes, he did say that today at the National Housing Federation.
Well, for those who didn't hear him, let me repeat it. We should have built more houses when we were in government.
Yeah,
but our priority, Ollie, was we were being rightfully lobbied by Shelter
when the sun was shining
to improve the quality of the social housing that was appalling. We had to bring those appalling council properties and social housing up to decent standards, and I'm not embarrassed of doing that. Now, we should have built more housing, but we didn't. But we need to sort that out. And actually, you know what? If we build more housing, it means more builders getting into work. They'll be paying national insurance. They'll be paying tax. And we've got to have a law that says to those who are land banking, you use it or you lose it. And we say to the property developers who are hoarding these land that unless you use the planning permission you've got to build these housing, we're going to take the land away from you and build the housing ourselves.
All right. Yeah, you sit over there. Gentleman in the blue pullover, yes.
You mentioned earlier, David, that you're getting to the stage where people in their 30s are only able to get onto the housing ladder for the first time. I was 30 when I got onto the housing ladder at the first time, and I entered the housing market with a mortgage rate of 15%. And the reason why I did that, and a lot of others did too, was one simple fact of mobility. We were willing to go where the job markets was. I was brought up in the North East, and I had to move to London to get a job in order to get onto the housing market. I don't see too much of that mobility in the marketplace at the moment.
What, are you saying young people won't move?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm saying they won't...
Sorry, who wants to pick up that point? Go on, then.
It hurts to be on this side of the Pennines, but I came here for a job. We move around all the time. We move to go to university. If where we go to university there isn't the jobs, we have to go to another city. We move around. You don't necessarily see it, but we do it.
Okay.
Surely basic economics tells us when demand outstrips supply, then price goes up. Jeremy's already told us that they're not building enough houses. At the same time, they're making it easier for people to get mortgages. Prices go up.
What do you think the effect will be on this generation who can't get on the housing ladder to, what do you say, 38?
38 in London.
38. Maybe adopt a more European approach, and I believe in Germany more people rent than own.
Yeah. Willy-nilly. Yes, you, sir, yes, there.
Isn't it just going to turn into a system where we're making, like Germany, we're going to end up renting, and the richer are going to get richer, we put more money in the pockets because we can't afford to get on the housing market ourselves?
Do you have any aspiration?
Yeah, I'm looking to buy myself, but unfortunately, I can't afford to get onto the market at the moment, so I'm going to be forced to rent.
And the woman here on the right, if we can get the microphone to there. Sorry, yes.
I don't understand where the space for these houses is going to be. We've currently got an immigration problem. We've got a lack of jobs. You're asking people and lending money to people, which now seems it's just like a statistics games for the government to make themselves look better. And eventually it will crash because the housing prices will go down.
Housing prices will go down?
Because there's more houses, the equity of the houses will depreciate, meaning it will crash eventually again. So I've got no intention of even wanting to get into that.
You don't want to get on the market, on the thing at all?
Well, we've got two very different views on that. And I think the answer is that we need a bit of both. We need to increase supply, but we also need to make sure that people can actually afford it when you do increase supply. And we need to be brave and accept that we're going to have to do that throughout the country. And I actually think it's perfectly possible to increase supply and also protect beautiful countryside. And I think there are lots of places, actually, where we could be a lot more imaginative. The NHS is one example. The NHS is actually sitting on a lot of land, which we could be much quicker at disposing of, and some of that could be appropriate for housing. But I do think that at the heart of this is actually a responsibility for those of us who actually did manage to get onto the housing ladder when houses were a lot cheaper, to actually think about doing what it takes for people who are much younger, who have the same dreams and aspirations we have. And actually, I think it doesn't work and it's not acceptable to sort of sit tight. And I think we have to say, well, what are we going to do? And I think tackling this from all directions is the only way to do that, because I want to look my children in the eye and say I did what it took to help you to enjoy the same ambitions and aspirations that I had as well.
All right, let's hear from one or two people on that side. You, sir, in the yes.
There are 13,500 houses which have permission to build in Salford, but nobody's building, and this number is going up by about 2,000 a year. Permission is being given, but none of the builders are building. So what's the government going to do about it?
And why do you think the builders aren't building? Waiting for the price to rise even higher?
Waiting for the price, yes.
So what can the government do about it?
Well, I think that's where things like the Help to Buy scheme make a difference, because people then begin to think that young people can access the finance to buy these houses, and then they're confident that they can build them and make a profit.
You can't force people to build. So
You can lapse their planning permission. You can lapse their planning permission.
Yeah, but what's that going to do? If they don't think it's profitable to build in Salford, they won't build.
They think it is, but they're waiting for the right time.
There's two things. One is people land banking, so banking in the land, so the value goes up over a period of time. Secondly, is them not having the confidence in the economy and not wanting to invest in bricks and mortar. And we've got to use whatever levers we've got to try and persuade them and cajole them. Olly's right. After a period of time, their permission you could revoke after 5 years. Well, actually, I'm saying let's go further. Let's say to them, unless you start building, you're going to on that land. We're going to take away the permission you have, and we can do it, and we should do it, and that'll persuade them, cajole them, force them to start building houses.
Right. OK, I think we'll go on to another question. Let's have one from Alice Sugden, please. Alice Sugden.
Will the reforms to the NHS do enough to prevent serious failings in care, such as those at Stafford Hospital?
Will the reforms in the NHS do enough to prevent serious failings in care? Olly Grender.
Well, so this week what the government has done is published some responses to the Francis report into mid-staffs. And I'm sure that Jeremy Hunt will go through quite a few in detail, but I'll just look at one in particular, which was actually in the Lib Dem manifesto, and it is about a duty of candour. Now, I see this as incredibly important. This is about honesty from people. When I hand my child into a nursery, I expect all the staff to be absolutely straight with me if anything has gone wrong. And it's exactly the same, you know, kind of as an elderly relative goes into a hospital, you want to know that there's an absolute expectation on both the organisation and the individuals in the organisation.
Yeah, but that goes without saying. But how will what happened at Stafford Hospital be prevented?
Unfortunately, it doesn't go without saying, and it hasn't happened.
It goes without saying that you think that should happen. But the question is whether the reforms that Jeremy Hunt has introduced will prevent it happening in future.
Well, I think that's just one example of one of the reforms that will prevent things like this in the future. And, you know, I'm kind of confident that that will happen. I think, in a way, that what we need to do is start celebrating the whistleblowers And, you know, this is exactly the kind of thing that we expect. We want people to be honest when something has gone wrong. And this is exactly what didn't happen in mid-staffs. So I'll just say, on this one particular point, but there's 77 other recommendations, yes, I have confidence. I have confidence in the others as well, but I just
think we better not list the other 70 or 280 or whatever it was. You on the right there.
So one of the reforms is going to criminalise nurses and doctors for willful neglect. Will that create a culture of openness within the NHS or a culture of fear?
Jeremy Hunt. Specific point, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, one of the shocking things about what happened at Mid-Staffs Hospital was that no nurses and doctors were brought to book for a very long time. In extremis, I think it is right if someone deliberately harms a patient. Lots and lots of doctors and nurses have spoken up in favour of this and said they wouldn't want a doctor who deliberately harms a patient not to meet the full force of the law. What sort of doctor or nurse would ever disagree with that? But that actually isn't the heart of the change, because the heart of the change is something different, which is actually doing what Olly was talking about, making it easier for people to speak out by giving them protection in their professional codes that they haven't had before. And I meet a lot of nurses and doctors who see things that they worry about, but then think, what will happen? What will happen to my career? What will my boss say if I speak out? We need to change the culture so that everyone understands that we all want people to speak out.
But her point was about criminalising.
Yeah, well, that I think will happen in a very
small happy with his answer
minority of cases.
Does that answer your point?
No, well...
What's your worry about it?
That by criminalising people, that other people will instead be scared to criminalise their colleagues. And that actually it will be contradictory.
In other words, they won't whistleblow, you think, if they think they'll get charged with
Perhaps.
criminal offence. You, sir?
Yeah. In order for that duty of candour to really work, it depends on the culture of the organisations, as you've said. And it really does depend on that going from the top throughout the organisation. Otherwise, a blame sort of culture enters. So what we're wanting, and it is different, I agree with you, that it's different, those prosecutions, those are slightly different because those are where harm has been done deliberately. But where it's a mistake, then we've got to have it so that staff will be able to put their hand up and say, look, I've messed up on this, I'm sorry, we've got to put it right, but also we've got to learn from it. And it's that culture of learning running through the organisations that I think will make the big change.
Okay.
Just on the point of criminalising neglect again, I'm going to qualify as a doctor in a couple of months' time. And I'm just wondering, why is it okay for other professions, when they make a mistake in their job, not to face incarcerations, but it's a completely different story for medical professionals? Why is that the case?
Yes, that's true. Well, that's not true. If you deliberately harm anyone in any profession or any walk of life, you're subject to law. Actually, this is just changing something that was in common law and putting it into statute. But I actually think this gentleman's made the point that's absolutely right. This isn't about trying to create more criminals. It's actually trying to create a culture of openness. And you have here one of the best hospitals in the country, Salford Royal, which is the safest hospital outside London. And they've done that because they have a very inspiring chief executive and a very inspiring chief nurse who have created a culture where the staff feel able to speak out. And that's because they think that if they talk about an error, something's going to happen, someone's going to learn from it, they're not going to be penalised for it.
There's also another in Greater Manchester, which is Greater Manchester West Mental Health Hospital Trust, where I happen to be on the board there.
Good, well, that's fair. And actually, there's the Wythenshawe. There are lots of great NHS organisations in Manchester.
Okay. Sadiq Khan.
Well, can I say that? I mean, I think the Francis report is a very good report. Unlike Olly and Jeremy, I think we should implement all of the recommendations in full. And I think one of the problems with Jeremy, and Jeremy talks a great talk, is actually the evidence is since his party joined a coalition government with Olly's party, the number of nurses, and Jeremy, my source is the NHS Information Centre today, the number of nurses is down by 6,642 since May 2010. What is one of the main findings of Francis? That staffing levels were so low, doctors and nurses led to inadequate care and let to bad things happen in mid-Staffordshire. My worry is this, Jeremy. You can have a criminal law about willful neglect, and you can publicise the ratio of staff on wards, but unless you give these hospitals the resources and the nurses, it's all talk and no action. And that's what needs to happen, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, let me respond to that. Because here are the figures that are equally robust that you didn't mention, which is that over the last 3 years we've actually had 6,600 more doctors in the NHS. We've got 1,200 more midwives. We've got 1,000 more health visitors. And yes, I am worried about the nurses going down. They haven't gone down in hospitals, actually. They've gone up, but they've gone down in the community. District nursing numbers have gone down.
The figure.
That is wrong, and that is why we are making the changes we're making this week, which means everyone has to publish the number of nurses they have so that we know if there's safe staffing. And as a result of these changes...
if they're too low?
If I can just...
We'll give them more resources if they're too
you
low.
don't actually really have anywhere to go because your party opposed a public inquiry into what happened in mid-Stats.
Political
but
point.
it's true. You didn't want to have the inquiry that we had.
You started Francis.
No, you asked him not to interrupt you.
Yeah, it is true. Andy Burnham decided not to have a public inquiry, and we decided to have it. And that's why we're adopting so many of these recommendations today. And what has happened as a result of that public inquiry that you didn't want to happen? Over the last year, our hospitals have decided to recruit 4,000 more nurses than they were planning to do 12 months ago. So I think the climate is changing. I completely agree. We've got to have safe staffing in our wards. But it's not about one number for all the wards. Actually, it's about what happens on a ward-by-ward basis. It's about transparency, and it's about people feeling comfortable to speak out when they see something that's wrong.
The woman here on the left.
Several years ago, the NHS carried out one of the biggest job evaluation exercises in Western Europe. During that job evaluation exercise, many nurses were removed from nursing grades and put onto management grades. And that's why a lot of nurses disappeared on the face of it. Now, a ward sister isn't a ward sister anymore. She's called a ward manager. So she's not counted in the nursing numbers. And
so you think the numbers are understated?
So I think we may not have lost that number of nurses.
Right. And up there, the man up there in the checked shirt.
You can talk about statistics all night. There's always two sides to every argument. But the question was about whether the reforms that the government are implementing are actually going to help. And one of the root causes that the Francis report said about Stafford Hospital was that it was because the management there were pushing to meet the government's targets and to try and get foundation status. That was why they were ignoring patients. They were more concerned about meeting their targets and getting foundation status so they had independence than they were about the patients. So the question is these reforms going to help? Would we not be better like removing politicians from the NHS, no offence intended, sir, by one step so that there can't be this constant reorganisation and changes going on? Because that's what's causing all the problems at the end. It's management.
Well, remove the politicians altogether. Very briefly, we've got to go on to another point.
It's also about ensuring that the care is wrapped around the individual. And so that's why the care bill that's currently going through the House of Lords is so important, because it breaks down all these different, if you say politically led or however, institutions, and instead it places them wrapped around so that one person gets the kind of dignity, attention, care and personal attention that they need. And that is the foundation of a bill that we're taking through the House of Lords at the moment.
Can I just very briefly say, I think you are absolutely right. The definition of success for a good hospital before was meeting your waiting times targets and being in financial balance. And we have set up this year a new Chief Inspector of Hospitals who is going round, and it will not be possible to be a good or outstanding hospital unless you have good or outstanding compassionate care.
Very briefly.
That is a big change.
Very briefly. To answer your question directly, I mean, patients need to be at the heart of what all hospitals do. I've got to say this, though. I mean, Jeremy talks a good talk again, and I know Jeremy doesn't like me mentioning figures, but patients, if they're at the heart of things, it means not waiting more than 4 hours for A&E. It means not lying on your trolley waiting for treatment. It means not being in an ambulance queuing up to get in. It means when you're an elderly patient, not waiting for days in the hospital rather than being at home. And that's the problem with the government's £3 billion wasted on a reorganisation nobody wanted.
So let's have a question now, please, from Kelly Parker, please. Kelly Parker.
With the UK jobless rate falling to a 3-year low last week, why is it that youth unemployment remains above 20%?
Why does youth unemployment remain above 20%? Sadiq Khan, you start on this.
Lots of reasons why we've still got a huge level of youth unemployment. One of the things that we were in government, is a guarantee for young people. If you're a graduate out of work for 6 months, you'd be guaranteed a job. The problem now is the government's idea of getting young people into work is just to get them stuck in shelves. I think that's inadequate. What you need to do is give young people the skills they need to make them attractive to employ. So work with employers to devise an apprenticeship scheme that will be useful to the employer, useful to the young person. Focus on the 50% who don't go to university, for example, a technical baccalaureate, vocational skills that will make them desirable to employers. Give young people the skills they need to make them attractive to employers. I think one of the great tragedies is the wasted talent amongst young people. One of the things I'm in favour of is a future jobs guarantee for a young person. If you're out of work for a year, we will guarantee you a job with an employer. We'll subsidise that with the employer. That way the employer gets some subsidy from the government. You as a young person get into work, get the skills, training you need to be attractive, start paying taxes, start paying national insurance.
Can you truthfully say that you can guarantee a job?
You can. Basically,
how? Who are these employers?
Because
just
what you do
waiting?
is, David,
they're all shaking their
David,
heads.
when you speak to small and medium-sized employers, they say one of the problems with the young people leaving colleges is they don't have the skills that we need. So you work in various parts of the country with the employers, the manufacturers, those who need skilled young people, and this will be one of the reasons why you'll be attractive rather than the big concern and criticism people have is people from overseas coming and taking some of these jobs.
All right, the woman there with the white all over on you, yes.
I'm doing a 4-year degree with a sandwich course right now. I'm in my 2nd year, so I'm looking for my placement. And I go on websites where there's 70 placements for accounting and finance, but only 7 are in the northwest. They're all down south in London.
And somebody earlier was saying they move. Would you move?
I would move if I
afford
couldn't
to.
get one in Manchester.
OK, you, sir, here in the front row.
Yes, surely you're talking about this. This all comes down to the downturn of industry in this country, and that industry has been eroded year after year after year after year. The whole problem is, if we started, for example, with nuclear energy, if we brought nuclear energy and the manufacture of the nuclear plants back to English people from a French company somewhere, that's going to provide apprenticeships.
But the point here is that employment overall is rising, but unemployment among the young has stood still. The woman at the very back there. Sorry, that's right. You in the back.
You're always talking about young people needing skills, and if they've got skills, there'll be a job for them. The jobs are not there. I've got a 28-year-old with a master's degree. And she's got loads of skills, and she's worked in Budapest, and she's worked on the West Bank, and she's worked for UNESCO in Paris for 6 months, unpaid as an intern. She's now working in Japan on a 3-month contract teaching English. She cannot get a job in the UK. You say move. The only time she's ever been able to move, she still can't get a job that will pay for housing, so she goes and illegally sublets because that's the only way she can afford somewhere to live. And an awful lot of her friends are in the same situation.
Okay.
They're trapped. They can't move, and the jobs aren't there, and they've got loads of skills.
Trapped.
Trapped.
Very hard.
Well, one thing I have to disagree with Sadiq about is not...
Why not take her point instead of disagreeing with Sadiq again?
Well, no, I was going to exactly come to her point and explain what I think the issue is, but I do want to say this. It's not governments that create jobs, it's the private sector that create jobs. And over the last 3 years, 400,000 new businesses have been created. And that's why we have 1.1 million more people in employment than we did 3 years ago. And I think that, you know, there are some signs that the tide is turning for youth unemployment. If you ask me what the single thing we could do that would make a big difference in this area, it is to make sure that the skills that people leave college or university with are relevant to the jobs market. And I think we did have a system where sometimes people were getting certificates, but they weren't actually matched very well with the kind of things that employers were looking for.
The lady who spoke at the back, her daughter seemed to have every qualification under the sun.
You mean like a job in McDonald's? I mean, I've been with my daughter round Preston giving out CVs, and they've opened the cupboard and said, oh, we don't want another one, look at all these.
Yeah, well, I think, let me say this, I think we have let down people like your daughter. I think that is the reality. We have let them down, and what we have to do is to make sure that all those years of education, what they come out with is a qualification that is valued by employers. And what is worrying to me is that we have a situation where unemployment is falling, jobs are going up, but it's not making a big dent in youth unemployment. And that's why I think we do need to look at the education system, at vocational education and apprenticeships.
And nothing is worse than that galling experience of looking for a job and not being able to find it. But here in this area, in the northwest, there is better news coming. So, for instance, HS2, that's quite far down the track, electrification, but the airport development is bringing jobs, but also for Greater Manchester, there's now a 5.8 million investment, and it is specifically about helping people to get into work, helping young people in particular to get into work. And as I said before, apprenticeships in this area, and I'm sorry that that doesn't apply to your incredibly qualified daughter, but apprenticeships have gone up 90% since Labour were in power. And I just want to say that...
Since Labour were in power?
Since Labour left power. I'm sorry, since
Which
Labour
coalition are you in, madam?
And I just want to say, and this is an important point with regard to the 50% that don't go to university, because the gentleman raised that issue earlier. And Ed Miliband talks about, you know, kind of the 50%, and he describes it as, you know, kind of the rest, or the people that almost don't matter or don't count. We do count those of us who didn't go to university, and the people that do apprenticeships, and the people that have done other routes to get into work.
Thank you, Olly. I want us to bring in, before we finish, some people who are affected by this who haven't spoken yet. Don't stick your hand up if you've spoken already. You haven't spoken, OK. You have or you haven't?
No, I haven't.
No, OK, fire away.
What I'd say is, you say employment's gone up, but what kind of jobs are they? Are there 0 hours where people are getting 15 hours a week? Are they agency jobs? Are they agency jobs where I've got employment agencies phoning me up saying, oh, we've got a job for you tomorrow, can you go down? I'll go down, only to find out it's a one-day contract.
OK,
you know what I mean?
And you, sir, with the beard?
Sadiq Khan, you know, it's all right bashing Conservative policies all the time, and I agree, there's massive problems with part-time jobs, etc. But where are you going to get your money from? You know, Labour's, you know, always their answer is let's borrow our way out of any problem. You're saying, you know, where are you going to get the money from for your policy?
Yeah. All right. And somebody who hasn't spoken on this side, the over-60s. You, sir, with the silver hair, appropriately, yes.
Yeah.
And the spectacles, yes.
The job sets, they're fixed. I mean, they talk about jobs, they're part-time jobs. Who can live on part-time jobs? And this is where the figures are all fixed.
Are you sympathetic to the youth who can't get work?
Yes, dead right, yes.
Yeah. And you say over here?
The reason there are no jobs is the way the economy is structured. If you pay somebody £4 million a year for sitting, pushing a mouse around a desk, and instead give them 100,000 and spend that money on some of these young people and give them jobs, they'll gain experience and we'll all benefit.
All right. On that idealistic note, we have to end because our time's up. We're going to be in Falkirk next week, the week the Scottish Government is publishing in detail its case for independence. That's what we'll be discussing there. The week after that, we're in London, and that's on the day of the Chancellor's pre-budget report, so we'll have the economy to look at. So if you want to come to either programme, Falkirk next Thursday, London the Thursday after, go to our website or call 0330 123 99 88. If you're tuned in to Radio 5 live on the BBC, you can continue the debate as ever on Question Time, Extra Time. But my thanks to our panel of 3. Just a reminder, Tim Stanley and Joan Bakewell couldn't get here because the train didn't deliver them, but we'll have them some other day. But thanks to this panel and to all of you, both, I won't call you old, over 60 and under 30s. Thank you all very much for coming here. Until next Thursday from Question Time. Good night.
Jon Snow on cycling safety and Delia Smith on giving young people life skills this week follows next here on BBC One.